Well, hello. My name is Robert, and welcome to this live stream today. And going to be looking at a little bit of news. I got a couple quiz questions for you, and hopefully we can make this a little bit interactive. And let me introduce myself. I am the editor and primary writer for Outbreak News Today at Substack. I host the Outbreak News Interviews podcast, and I also run the Outbreak News TV on YouTube. So for people that are watching on YouTube, it would be Outbreak News TV. And I'm also streaming on Facebook today, and that is at the page called Infectious Disease News. So that's where I'm streaming today. And I want to go ahead and invite everybody, if they're interested, if they want to join the conversation, right? If there's something going on in your part of the world, if you're in the US, your part of the states that you'd like to talk about, if you have a personal experience with a disease, if there's anything that interests you, anything, if you have some kind of expertise, I'd love to bring you on. Let me know you want to come on, and I'll bring you on the show, and you can talk. And so let me go ahead and move on from that. So hopefully we can get some people to jump on and take a look at what we're doing. The first thing I want to talk about is a news story that came across a couple days ago, and this is in Missouri. And in Missouri, they have a case of Naegleria fowleri. That's probably, you may be familiar with it as being called the brain-eating amoeba in the different media. Now, this case is in an adult, which is not the usual. We often see this in children more often, but we see them in adults. And it's highly lethal. I haven't seen any reports out yet of the status of this case other than he's being hospitalized and treated in intensive care. And this is the second case in the past month in the US. We saw one in I think it was South Carolina 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was a 12-year-old boy, and that was a fatal case. And almost all the cases are fatal. It's about 97% case fatality. There's been very, very few people that survived, and rapid identification and treatment is key to survival with this very, very dangerous disease. So yeah, that's going on, and according to the Department of Health in Missouri, they think it was due to this I think it's a man, this gentleman who was water skiing in the Lake of the Ozarks. And that wouldn't be unheard of. I mean, you're out in warm, fresh water. It's being stirred up. You fall off your water skis. You plunge into the water. Water runs up your nose, and voila, you have this very, very dangerous parasite. So what I'm going to do a little bit later in the live streams, I'm going to talk a little bit more about Naegleria fowleri, since 'tis the season, right? It's very hot out. I'm in the state of Florida. It's well over 90, and with then other states like Texas, probably about the same. And the water, because of the temperature warmth, the water's getting warmer even further north. So, I mean, we just saw a number of cases in Finland, not Finland. In Finland, because of warm water, but it was a different organism. It was Vibrio vulnificus. In people that were swimming off the coast of the Baltic Sea, I mean, this is Finland. I mean, so if it's warm enough for Finland to get, a Vibrio vulnificus infection, we are going to continue seeing more of these diseases in more obscure places. But this was in Missouri. We've seen Naegleria cases. I've reported on them from Minnesota. I think that may be the most northern state that's reported a case. I could be wrong, but I think that's true. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. I'm going to show you kind of a cool video of this medical technologist who is going to talk about diagnosing it by looking at a CSF under the microscope, and it's really, really kind of neat. I guess the next question I like to ask you all is, where are you from? I know Infectious Disease News has about 75,000 followers from all over the world. So I'd like to know where you're from. Is there something that's going on in your part of the world that's worth talking about? I love to talk about it. Love to bring you on and talk about it. If you're an expert in one of these diseases, or if you're a victim of one of these diseases, love to hear more about it. So let me know where you're from. Just type it into the into YouTube or into Facebook, and like to know where you're from. Okay, and let me start with my first quiz. I did two quiz questions. One is relatively easy, and the second one is not so much. So we'll take a look at that. So let's go ahead with the first quiz questionnaire. What is this organism? Okay, this particular organism can produce enterotoxin and cytolysin. Okay, any guesses with that little bit of information? On a gram stain, this is a procedure that microbiologists use to look at and stain the organism and look at the morphology under a microscope, which can give us color and shape, type of information, which is key a lot of times, even to treatment. Like if you're doing a blood culture or a CSF gram stain, based on what you tell the doctor in the gram stain, they may start treatment, antibiotic treatment, immediately based on that. If you say it's a gram positive cocci and clusters, the doctor's going to say, oh, we're dealing with a staph, and they'll start out with some sort of treatment for staphylococcus. Another part of the quiz is, it's spread through contaminated water or food. All right, so that should narrow it down to several. Well, it narrows it down a lot. So there's several organisms that could be based on that one criteria: contaminated water or food. The one above it, the gram-negative comma-shaped bacilli, that kind of narrows it down. And this next clue narrows it down even further. One of the symptoms is rice water stools. Okay. And there's been 7 pandemics throughout history since, I think, the early 1800s. And the most recent pandemic started in 1961 and is still current to today. So does anybody have any ideas what this organism is? I'll give you a few moments. Some countries have seen quite a bit of it this year. Africa's seen quite a bit, the continent. Algeria reported a large outbreak this year. Geez, let's see. Not that with it. I think it was about a decade ago, maybe a decade or more. Haiti had that huge earthquake. I think that was 2010. And one of the things that came out of this was a massive I gave it away. The organism is Vibrio cholera. They had this massive Vibrio cholera outbreak that infected hundreds of thousands of people and killed thousands. So anyway, yeah, I gave the answer away. Yeah, the answer is Vibrio cholera. And so do we ever see Vibrio cholera in the U.S.? Rarely. If we do, a lot of times it's travel associated. But it is an organism that is found in salt water. So, but a lot of it has to do with proper sanitation, proper hygiene, and the like. So, yeah. So that's the answer to the first quiz. It's Vibrio cholera, and you can even see on the slide here that it's a motile organism. It has a flagella on the one end, and it is a gram-negative. When I say gram-negative, that means it's when you do the gram stain, the crystal violet will be washed out, and the safranin or the counter stain will fill up the cell, and so you get this red appearance. And it is a little curved, and there's not a lot of curved gram-negative rods out there. Vibrio is one of them. Sometimes you can see that in Campylobacter, but it's usually pretty limited to the amount. E. coli is not going to be a curved rod, for example. Okay, let's go to the next thing. All right, well, here's a question I like to ask the audience. What infectious diseases interest you most? And I also like to ask, are there people out there that you would like to hear me talk to on the podcast? Are there people I haven't talked to or topics I haven't covered on the podcast that you would like to hear about? But what infectious diseases interest you most? Anybody got anything for me? Well, I have 3 favorites and 1 group of favorites. I'll go ahead and talk about it. See if anybody else wants to chime in. One of the ones that interest me most is the one I've talked about already so far, is Naegleria fowleri, and I started learning about this. I mean, I learned about it in school, but didn't pay a whole lot of attention. But when there was a case in Texas, and I talked to the family. I had the radio show back then, so it was around 2013. I got really interested in it, and also one of the first interviews I did on the radio show. This was actually on the 4th of July weekend, I believe, or maybe a couple weeks after. There was a young girl in Arkansas. Her name was Kaylee Hardig. She was 12 years old, and she contracted the disease. I think it was at like a water park in Arkansas. And she was given, multiple types of treatment, including this drug that was actually designed for treating leishmaniasis. It's called miltefosine, and she survived it. And she was the first survivor. This is 2013. She was the first survivor of Naegleria fowleri since, I think it was 1978 or something like that. It was decades since we saw somebody survive this disease. So, and in the US, I believe there's been 4 people that have survived it out of a much larger number. We'll get into that a little bit later. So that's one of the ones that really interests me. And I remember in 2019, I had the privilege of going to the 29, people laugh at me when I say this, the 2019 Amoeba Summit. And there's a couple, Stephen Shelley Smelsky, who lost a son, who contracted the disease in Costa Rica and died in Orlando, young boy, about 11. And so they started a foundation in his name, the boy's name, Jordan. And in 2019, they invited me out to the Amoeba Summit to interview all these wonderful experts and guests they had at the summit. So they gave me a room just for the interviews, private room, set up the camera, just had a little table there. And I don't know, talked to 7 or 8 different people about different aspects of the disease. So that was a lot of fun. So yeah, that disease interests me a lot. One, because I'm in Florida. Of all the cases in the U.S. since 1962, about roughly, maybe a little bit less, but about half of the cases have been reported out of Florida or Texas. And those 2 states are pretty split. So Florida has about a quarter of all the cases in the U.S. Another disease that really fascinates me, and again, it's got a serious lethality, is rabies. And I spent some time in a state public health lab, and though I didn't do the rabies testing because I was more in a management position, I was involved in it. I learned a lot about it, and I used to watch. I used to help. I read some slides, but I used to observe the techs, doing the necropsy, taking the brain out of the animals to be tested. Yeah, rabies has always fascinated me. It's a big, here in Florida, it's usually either raccoons or bats. Bats are, of course, are universal throughout the country for rabies. In fact, they just had a story. I don't know if you saw that. They had a story that they're concerned that maybe hundreds of people may have been exposed to rabies in Grand Teton Park because of some lodges they have there. Had, I don't know if you call it a nest, but nest of bats in the attics or something like that. And so they're trying to contact people throughout the country and throughout the world that may have stayed there to let them know. So be interesting to continue following that and see where that leads to. The other animal that's big here on the East Coast, including Florida, for rabies is raccoons. Then when you look at like around more of the central part of the country, say Texas, like that, it's skunks are a big source of rabies. Foxes, you see foxes. Also kind of common in Puerto Rico, for example. I think the animal most attributed to transmitting rabies in Puerto Rico is the mongoose. And if outside of the U.S., one of the domestic animals that are really kind of increasing in prevalence for being rabid are cats in the U.S. There's a lot of feral cats in a lot of places, and dog rabies is more minimalized, though that is the main animal throughout the world. I think I read one time in India, after dogs, because India has a big rabies problem. I don't know if it's 30,000 human cases a year, and and that's without prophylaxis, that's basically universally fatal. But the other animal in India that they report that transmits quite a bit of the rabies there is monkeys. So yeah, it can be any mammal that can transmit rabies. So yeah, so I've always been fascinated with that organism, that virus, the bullet-shaped virus. If you ever saw a picture of it, and the third one is more unusual than the ones I've already mentioned, and that's an ascarid parasite called Baileys ascaris. I've been fascinated with that for a very, very long time. Now that's a parasite I didn't learn in school, because in as a clinical laboratory scientist, microbiologist, you're not going to see the eggs of the worm in the stool, because it's the worm doesn't mature in the human. So it goes into the larval stage, and then it starts to migrate and then lodges somewhere and can cause some incredibly severe infection and death. Baileys ascaris procyanus is found pretty universally in raccoon feces, and a very fascinating parasite. And I do have, several videos on Outbreak News TV, the YouTube channel, about Baileys ascaris if you're interested in learning about that. But those are my favorites. I guess nobody has any favorites or any ones that really interest them. Nobody commented. But let me go ahead and move on. If you do have, I want to just go back. Let me know what country you're from or what state you're from. Let me know what infectious diseases interest you most. Is there anybody you'd like to see me talk to, or any topic you'd like to see me talk about on the podcast or on the YouTube channel? Let me know, because I've covered a lot of stuff over the years. I did a radio show in Tampa, Florida from 2013 to 2019, a weekly radio show called Outbreak News This Week. And I got to talk to a lot of people over that span, and then I started the podcast. Okay, let me go ahead and move on. And again, if you want to join, if you want to talk about something that's going on in this little world of infectious diseases, outbreaks, etc., let me know. We'll see if we can get that taken care of. All right, Naegleria fowleri. Now, okay. Bill from Facebook says he's interested in Nipah viruses and viruses in general. Yeah, very interesting. Nipah viruses. We've seen a number of cases this year. I think there's been 3 in Bangladesh, all fatal. And I think they were all fatal. And in Kerala State, India, I think there's been 4 cases year to date. And those are typically the two countries that we see it in anymore. Of course, we saw a massive outbreak a couple decades ago in Malaysia and Singapore. But since then, since 2000-ish, it's been primarily Bangladesh, and then India has been picking up in cases recently. And this is due to large bats, Terapus bats, I think that's what they're called, these large fruit bats. And a lot of people say in Bangladesh, they contract it by eating contaminated date palm sap. And this is a really, really fatal, or very, very dangerous, lethal, fatal about, I don't know, 70% of the time, maybe. Virus. And there's been a lot of concern. You see that the World Health Organization puts it on their list of, diseases they're concerned about as far as being a pandemic. But it is a very, very lethal virus. And yeah, really been keeping an eye on Kerala State in India. They've been having a lot of cases of a lot of different things. They had a Naegleria fowleri outbreak, I think it was last summer. and they've been seeing a lot of Nipah recently too. And as Bill said, viruses in general. There's viruses that are very closely related to Nipah, the Hendra viruses. We see that frequently, not frequently. None of these are really seen frequently, but Australia, we sometimes see Hendra virus. We see that in horses sometimes, but very dangerous also. And viruses in general. I mean, you can go through the list, right? Ebola, Marburg, to things that are less pathogenic, COVID or influenza. Viruses are everywhere, and yeah. And Bill, anybody else out there, if you go to Outbreak News TV, the YouTube channel, I do have some interviews with experts on Nipah virus if you want to check that out. All right, let me go back to Naegleria fowleri. Now, several years ago, at least a decade or more ago, I interviewed Dr. Sandra Gompf. She is an infectious disease physician, and she's also married to a physician. I think he's a pediatrician. And 15 or so years ago, their young son, I don't remember how old he was, probably less than 10. He was out in Polk County, Florida, which is, if you look at Tampa, St. Petersburg area, that's on the coast, and go towards Orlando, you're going to come across Polk County. I think Lakeland is the major city there. And out in that part of the state of Florida, there's a lot of lakes, a lot of freshwater lakes, and they are toasty warm this time of year. And anyway, I'm going to go ahead and show a short video that she talks about a little bit about this. She's worked really hard, Dr. Gompf, on spreading information about Naegleria fowleri. And this is a little video. I think she's a professor at University of South Florida too, my alma mater. And she talks about the case of her son. It's a short video. Let me go ahead and get that hooked up here. Okay. Let me go ahead and play this, and then I'll come back.
In 2009, our son Philip went to Lake Arietta in Polk County with his cousins to swim and wakeboard. About 4 or 5 days after that, he came to us and said that he had a headache before bedtime. He didn't have any fever. He was doing okay, so we let him go to bed. By the next morning, he was hard to wake up, and Tim rushed him directly to the pediatric ward at the hospital where he works. He was found pretty quickly to have a severe meningitis. And in 3 days, he was gone. Philip passed away on August 17th, 2009. It wasn't until his autopsy that we were informed that he had Naegleria fowleri meningitis. Tim and I are both doctors who are specialists in serious diseases and serious infections, and we couldn't save our son. We don't want this to happen to anyone else. Amoebic meningitis has only been documented from activities that force water up the nose, like water sports in lakes and rivers. It's 99% fatal, but it is 100% preventable. You just need to keep water out of the nose. Use nose clips when swimming. Keep the head dry. Keep the head out of water. Be aware and know how to swim safe in fresh water that hasn't been chlorinated. If I could tell you one thing that Philip would want you to know, it would be to enjoy nature, but to remember that natural bodies of water are alive. We want to keep this disease as rare as possible. So it's very important to us that people be aware of how easy it is to prevent. For more information, we have a website, amoebaseason.com, that has lots of information for the public. It also has a section for health professionals.
All right. Well, again, that obviously very sad. And the interesting thing about the Gomp case was, yes, both parents were physicians, are physicians, and it's still happened to them. So, yeah, very, very tragic. I've talked to Dr. Gomp several times in different podcasts, and she's a wealth of knowledge about this. And I encourage you to check out their website, amoebaseason.com. And it is, in fact, amoeba season throughout the United States and elsewhere. I mean, it's not just the United States. It's we see cases in Australia. I've seen cases in Vietnam, Mexico, and perhaps the country that's seen the most cases recently is Pakistan. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But let me go ahead and go back to this. And so let me talk just a little bit about Naegleria fowleri. I mean, Dr. Gomp gave some good information. Okay, this is a free living amoeba, so it doesn't require a host. So it's in the water. In the summer, you typically see it when the water gets warmer, as she mentioned in the video. But also what happens during the summer a lot is water levels drop a bit. And you stir up that sediment at the bottom of the lakes or rivers or streams or you can stir up the parasite and then it starts floating around. And so places you need to be concerned about this are warm freshwater lakes and rivers, ponds, and hot springs. There's plenty of hot springs here in the state of Florida. And if I remember correctly, with the Smelsky's case, they went to Costa Rica, and I think he told me, I did a long interview podcast with him, and you can find that on the YouTube channel, that they were going down water slides into hot spring water. It was like their last day or second to last day before they were going home too. So that makes it even that much more sad. And so these are places you can contract it, and it's typically seen with recreational water use, swimming, splashing, diving, jumping off the cliff to go into the water, or water skiing, as in the Missouri case. It's also been seen in other places. For example, if you have a swimming pool in your yard and it's not maintained well, it's not well chlorinated and kept clean, you risk it. You risk it. We've seen it in splash pads, neti pots. I remember several years ago there was, I think, at least 2 or 3 cases due to neti pot use in Louisiana, and they were using tap water. So yeah, tap water should not be used for anything that's going to be cleaning your nasal area. Because Naegleria can be found in tap water. You cannot catch this parasite via swallowing water. Nothing's going to happen to you. It has to rush up the nose. Then the parasite will travel up the olfactory nerve into the brain, and they call it the brain-eating amoeba for a reason. It does kind of literally do that. It starts eating the brain. Very serious stuff. Typically, you're going to see early on, and you got to remember that this disease, and that I didn't tell you the name of the disease is yet. It's primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, or PAM. PAM is the acronym. Usually very early on, it's headache and fever and vomiting, more non-specific syndrome or symptoms. But then it progresses, and it progresses very fast. And that's one of the things about it is by the time the doctor may figure out what it is, it's gone so far that usually any kind of treatment that is available, and the treatment is not the greatest. It's not like taking an antibiotic for strep throat. It doesn't have that same effectiveness. So, and a person that contracts this parasite, because it is so fulminant and rapidly progressing, they can die within a day or two, or it can go up to a couple weeks. But it is very fast. Typically, it's coma and death within less than a week. So, yeah, very, very serious stuff. And like I mentioned before, in Pakistan has seen, oh my goodness, probably since 2008, over 100 cases all itself. They've had years where they've seen over 10, 15 cases in a year. And most of those are not due to recreational water use and swimming and all that. It's due to ablution, which is nasal rinsing. It's forgive me if I don't get this 100% correct, but it's a Islamic ritual called ablution, where you do nasal rinsing, and they're using tap water. And Pakistani officials have been really working really hard on this. At least I hope they are. I've seen different articles out of Pakistan media. Some are very critical of the government, and others are not so much. But they're taking care of this problem with the city water of cities like Karachi and Lahore, with this amoeba in it. So, and as Dr. Gump said in the video, the best way, the only way, is to make sure water doesn't rush up your nose if you want to prevent it. Nose clips, nose plugs, holding your nose. Honestly, I never took my daughter to any freshwater lakes when she was a child. Call me paranoid, but we just did not do that. And anytime you're going to use anything for sinus or nasal cleansing, only use distilled or boil the tap water before you do it, because otherwise you run the risk of contracting this amoeba, because it can be found in tap water. Now, diagnosis, I think the CDC has, maybe a few other labs around the country have some more specialized testing for it. But your average lab at your hospital down the street, community hospital, LabCorp or Quest, they're not going to have this kind of testing available. But what they could be able to do, and you wouldn't be able to send it out to, you wouldn't have the time to send it to like one of the mega labs to have them test it, look at it under a microscope. That hospital would have to, take care of that. And then most med techs or most clinical lab scientists, microbiologists, I've never seen this thing. I've never seen it in real life. So that tells you, it's rare enough that somebody who works in the field who looks at CSF, cerebral spinal fluid, for those who didn't understand that abbreviation. But I wanted to show y'all another video of this med tech in, I want to say she's from Arkansas. And she's going to talk a little bit about identifying Naegleria under the microscope in a CSF. Let's see what she has to say.
So let's take a look at some laboratory techniques for detection of amoeba. It's certainly not unusual to receive a cerebral spinal fluid for testing in the clinical laboratory, especially from patients admitted to the emergency room with symptoms that point to meningitis. The typical test orders are for glucose, protein, culture with gram stain, and cell count. Protocol should dictate that these samples are handled stat. Since CSF is a hypotonic solution, cells such as neutrophils can lyse rapidly. When performing the cell count, differential, and the gram stain, we report what we see. But sometimes extra sample handling or manipulation is necessary to find things such as amoeba that may not be that visible or obvious at first glance when traditional laboratory testing procedures are utilized. Communication with the caregiver is critical when cases of meningitis are suspected, especially if primary amoebic meningoencephalitis is suspected. In these cases, it would be critical to know if the patient had had freshwater exposure in their recent history. At our institution, we've made this information part of our actual cell count order. When a patient presents with symptoms of meningitis, the physician is reminded through the laboratory order system to ask this question in the emergency room. When the order is received in the laboratory, the technologist can see the response in the result menu. The answer to the question is not mandatory, but the laboratory can still see this prompt each and every time they receive an order for a CSF cell count. This serves as a reminder to the technologist that amoeba could still be a possibility. The first step in processing of a CSF is to charge your counting chamber. What we're looking for in the CSF is the amoeboid movement of the trophozoite stage of the amoeba. A plain glass slide with a drop of well-mixed CSF that is cover slip can serve well also for looking for the amoeba. Contrast stains are not recommended for CSF cell counts, as these will kill the amoeba and you'll not be able to see any movement of the organisms. Warming the sample can enhance amoeba movement. Amoeba also become more active in warmer environments. The warming can be accomplished in several ways. A small aliquot of CSF can be warmed to 35 degrees in an incubator or water bath. The slide can also be warmed by allowing it to sit on the microscope stage for a few minutes. The light from the microscope can be enough warmth to encourage movement. This video shows a CSF sample that was plated into a standard plastic counting chamber for a cell count. You can see the size of the amoeba in relation to the chamber squares.
All right, well, yeah, I'll go ahead and stop there, but that gives you an idea of what you're looking at. And some key things that Sheila said was in order to enhance the motility, which is because if it's not showing motility, it could be very easy to or difficult to differentiate from, say, a white blood cell. So by enhancing the motility, it becomes much more obvious. And in a CSF, you're not going to really see anything else moving around, right? So, yeah. So I thought that video was very interesting, and you can find that on the Jordan Smelsky Foundation website. There's a whole hour-long video that's very, very, very informative. So I encourage you to check that out. Let me go back to Naegleria now. Treatment. Well, before I go into treatment, I was going to say, when you go to an emergency room and you have a bad headache and all that, and they may stiff neck, they may think immediately of bacterial meningitis or viral meningitis. If you had been swimming in fresh water and you know that water ran up your nose, that would probably be a good thing to tell the ER doctor, because that should ding ding, you know, a bell should go off, raising concern of the possibility of this. Treatment and recovery. I was going to talk about that a little bit, because the treatment is basically a combination of different drugs. And, you know, like I said, there's been 4 survivors in the US, and some of these drugs do show some anti-amoeba activity against Naegleria. And so, some of the ones are, let me go ahead and put it on the screen in case you want to see it. Okay, here we go. So amphotericin B, azithromycin, posaconazole. You know, some of these are like antifungals. Rifampin, then miltefosine, I talked about a little bit earlier. That's been kind of, it's not the silver bullet or anything, but people that have survived it, that's always been a key drug in the arsenal. And remember, and this has got to be really, really fast. That's why all the information given to the doctor, quick diagnosis and quick administration of these drugs is all key, really, really important. In here, they talk about the drugs that were used for some of the recent survivors. So we'll look at the 3 on the right. We have a U.S. female survivor from 2013. I think that's the Kaylee Harding case. A U.S. male survivor same year, and then another survivor in 2016. I think that was a boy also. Even the one in the middle, if I remember correctly, that male from 2013, he survived, but he has some severe neurological issues after the fact. But you can see that amphotericin B, rifampin, fluconazole, azithromycin, miltefosine, and dexamethasone were all administered for them. And I want to say, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, that no, I'm not going to say that. It was rabies, different disease. But yeah, just wanted to share that with you. So yeah, there's so many things that have to fall into place. I remember with miltefosine, I remember in 2016, I interviewed the CEO for the company Impavido. I think that they're based out of Orlando. And it's so serious. There was a case in South Carolina around the 2016 time. And they needed the drug so fast that apparently I heard they called him, the CEO, and he, in his pajamas, grabbed a box of miltefosine, drove up to South Carolina, a 12-hour drive, to take it to the hospital so they could try to administer it. But unfortunately, the child did die. But that's how serious the CEO of a pharmaceutical company took it. There was probably no other way to get it there any quicker. And I thought it was a very interesting and generous story. But let me see if there's anything else I want to talk about concerning Naegleria fowleri. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. But yeah, I was talking about Pakistan a little bit ago, and the first instance of the brain-eating amoeba in Pakistan was documented in 2008. And in some of the most recent years, they had 6 cases in 2017, 1 in 2018, 15 in 2019. And almost all these cases are fatal. I think I'll stop with Naegleria there. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask. I'd love to hear about it. And Beck's Bit of Blue from the YouTube channel says, what are we talking about today? And we're talking about, I don't know, we started out with this brain-eating amoeba case just diagnosed in Missouri, somebody that was water skiing in the Lake of the Ozarks. As far as I know, it still survived, but that may have changed. I did a quiz, and I'm going to talk about maybe 1 or 2 more news stories. I have another quiz. And like I said, if anybody wants to come on the show and talk about what they know about any of these diseases, what's going on in their country, in their city, anything, I'll bring you on. But Beck's Bit of Blue, thanks for watching. And let's go ahead and move on. Is it a bug or a disease? It is a amoebic parasite. It is an amoebic parasite, and it's found in fresh water, typically warm fresh water. And you only can contract it if it goes up your nose. And it's 97, 98% fatal. All right, let me go ahead and move on from here. And anyway, that's the life cycle, and it's in fresh water, and it goes up your nose, and it rushes into your brain, and that's the case. And it is an amoeba, so there's 2 stages. There's the trophozoite stage, the motile stage, and that's the one that causes the disease. And then there's a cyst stage, which is found in the water. In the U.S., since 1962, there have been 167 reported cases of PAM. Remember, that's primary amoebic meningoencephalitis. In the United States, only 4 have survived. So, yeah, it's rare, but that doesn't mean the amoeba is rare in water, in fresh water. You just have to have all the right conditions and have it go up your nose. So, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to beat that to death, and we'll move on to the next thing. And that's we have a good size outbreak of Legionnaires disease going on in New York City, and it's in central Harlem, and it involves 1, 2, 3, 5 zip codes. And as of August 15th, as of yesterday, there's been 101 confirmed cases and 4 fatalities in this Legionnaires disease outbreak. Now, New York City Health has been sampling and testing water from cooling towers in this investigation. And any cooling towers that have been positive with Legionella bacteria are being treated. If you're not familiar with Legionella or Legionnaire's disease, it's a respiratory illness. It's a type of pneumonia caused by a bacterium called Legionella, which grows in warm water. And you may remember a little bit of history about this in 1976 in Philadelphia, the Legionnaires' disease outbreak. That's how it got its name, because a bunch of Legionnaires contracted it from this hotel in Philadelphia. A lot of its symptoms are flu-like, but it can be very serious if you're in one of those, high-risk groups. You contract it by inhaling mist that contains the bacteria. You can't get Legionnaire's disease by drinking water. It has to be inhaled. And the bacteria does not spread through cooled air from air conditioners. So you don't have to worry about that. If you're at increased risk, if you are over 50 years old, if you smoke, have chronic lung disease, a weakened immune system, or if you take medicines that weaken your immune system, like, transplant drugs, cancer drugs, like that, anything that's going to knock down your immune system. So in Legionella also causes a condition called Pontiac fever, which is a much less severe form of basically a Legionnaire's disease. The best way to prevent it is through proper maintenance of water systems where Legionella might grow. So every time you do see an outbreak like this, it always ends up being the water systems in different buildings in the city. That's usually how it happens. I mean, there's outliers, but that's usually the case. Okay, let's see. Beck's Bit of Blue on Outbreak News TV on the YouTube channel says, so we can drink it safely, because I wonder if it's in drinking water. I'm not sure if you're talking about Naegleria or if you're talking about Legionella, but the answer to both is yes, you can drink them safely. That's not how they're transmitted. Naegleria, the parasite, goes up through the nose. Legionella is inhaled. It's a respiratory disease. So thanks for the question, Beck's Bit of Blue. All right, what do I have next on the agenda? Another quiz. This is going to be a little bit more challenging. Not a lot of people are familiar with this organism, but let's see how you do. Okay, what is the pathogen? First thing, it's an arenavirus. And if you're not familiar with arenaviruses, probably the most common ones that people in the U.S. may have heard about, not because they're in the U.S., but they're more common. Lassa fever, the Lassa virus in Nigeria and surrounding countries in Africa, Chapare virus in Bolivia, Junin virus. So, I mean, these are not household names, in other words. So it's an arenavirus. It's likely zoonotic, which means, transmitted from animal to people. Although in this case, there's the specific animal reservoir has not been identified. However, I have read in other sources that they believe it's some kind of a rodent. Now, there's been a single documented outbreak ever, one outbreak. And in 2008, an individual in Zambia became infected from an unknown source. They then traveled to South Africa and were admitted to a hospital. Unfortunately, 4 healthcare workers caring for the index case, the one from Zambia, were subsequently infected. So 4 out of 5 confirmed cases in this outbreak were fatal. So this is the whole history of this organism. That was the outbreak, and it infected 5 people, the index case, and 4 healthcare workers. And 4 of that total died, 80% case fatality rate. What is the pathogen? Yeah, I know this is a tough one. This is definitely not an everyday organism. All right. Maybe I made it a little too hard, huh? It's Lujo virus. Lujo virus. What is Lujo virus? Well, first I want to just take a look at the chart that's on here. So patient 1 is the one on the bottom, and that's the individual from Zambia. And I think it says it's a woman who was a travel agent. And then she went to, that's where she contracted it. She went to South Africa. I believe it was in Johannesburg. And she was being treated. Then the top 4 are different workers in the hospital. I think one may be a custodian and the others are healthcare workers. and the only one that survived it was the one on the top. So very, very pathogenic. It causes Lujo hemorrhagic fever. And Rich says, wait, I was going to say idiopathic virus. Yeah, good answer. Good answer. But Lujo hemorrhagic fever is obviously very rare, and some experts say it probably is spread by rodents. It's deadly. There's no treatment, and there's not a whole lot known about this. So like I said, rodents. So it's at least the CDC says that people get it by through the infected rodents or their urine droppings or saliva. So it kind of sounds a little like hantavirus, right? And they had that one outbreak in 2008. Symptoms: rash of the face and torso, face and neck swelling, sore throat. The one thing that's different from other hemorrhagic fevers, right? Ebola, Marburg, Lassa. Bleeding is not a typical symptom with Lujo. And the CDC says in fatal cases, a brief improvement was followed by rapid deterioration, trouble breathing, and problems with the heart and brain and nerves. And death occurred, within 2 weeks. So, yeah, pretty serious stuff. But then, like I said, there's not a whole lot known about it. It's probably the wrong kind of quiz question I should have asked, because it's kind of out there. It's a little strict. Let's go ahead and move on from Lujo. I think I killed everybody with that one. And just a reminder to subscribe and follow the Substack. It's scrolling at the bottom. Outbreaknewstoday.substack.com. I've been doing this since October 2023. After doing the website outbreaknewstoday.com for 10 years, then we went ahead and me and my business partner, we sold all the businesses, and instead of going through all this mess with having a website and trying to maintain it and all the problems that come along with having a website, getting hacked, all that, I went ahead and started doing Substack. So check it out. Go check it out. I probably put up 2 or 3 news stories a day. It all depends on how busy I get with my 9 to 5 and family life. And it's some good stuff. What I try to do is, when you see a lot of very common news out there, because let me tell you how this works. When I started doing this stuff back in 2009, there wasn't a lot of people writing about this stuff. There wasn't a lot. And the amount of traffic I used to get because it was so unusual, and a lot of people were covering it, was a lot. Well, then all of a sudden, I think the big kicker was 2020 2014 to 2016, the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. Time Magazine, Sports Illustrated, I mean, pick it. They were all covering the outbreak. And so that kind of crushed more independent people like myself. But what I try to do on the Substack is cover stories that aren't being covered really widely out in mainstream type media. Because, I mean, there's a lot of that out there. So I try to dig up, details that other people aren't. Sometimes journalists actually email me or contact me via one of the social media and ask me where I found the source, So I know how to dig for some of this stuff. So anyway, outbreaknewstoday.substack.com. Okay. The Pan American Health Organization, that's a wing of the World Health Organization that deals with North America, Central America, and South America, put out a new report about the 10 countries in the Americas that are reporting measles outbreaks. And they're calling on the countries of the Americas to strengthen immunization activities, enhance disease for surveillance, and rapid response interventions as measles cases continue to rise in the region. And they report I always remember that the international organizations get their numbers much later. So if you go straight to the source, you always see the most accurate numbers. But they're saying as of August 8th, a total of more than 10,000 confirmed measles cases and 18 deaths have been reported across 10 countries. But this is a key figure I found. This represents a 34-fold increase compared to the same period last year. And this is due to the obvious thing, low vaccination coverage. 7 out of 10 cases are in unvaccinated individuals, and another 2 out of 10 cases are in those that their status is unknown. So they may be unvaccinated. Also, they may be just got 1 dose, or maybe they were fully vaccinated, but we don't know. Now, the countries with the highest number of cases, see if anybody can guess, what country in the Americas has the most measles cases so far this year? I'm throwing it out there. Anybody know? Anybody know? Well, if your guess was Canada, you would be correct. And Canada has reported the most with over 4,500 cases. Big bulk of the cases have been from Ontario, which has been well over 2,000, and Alberta, which is close to 2,000. So those 2 provinces have done the worst, and other provinces maybe have 100 or less than 100, but those were the 2 biggies. They report here that Mexico had 3,900 cases, and the U.S. 1,300 cases. So that's North America. So North America got blasted with measles this year so far. The other cases, the other outbreaks are Bolivia, which is the largest outbreak outside of North America, with 200 plus cases. Argentina, Belize, Brazil, Paraguay, Peru, and Costa Rica. Now, the deaths have been reported in Mexico, the U.S., and Canada. So what I wanted to do real quick was I wanted to focus on Mexico briefly. See, Beck's Bit of Blue said California. Yeah, there's been an outbreak in California. I'm not sure what the number is. It's been a while since I looked at that. But yeah, I mean, I think 41 of the 50 states have had a measles outbreak so far this year. Thanks again, Bex Bido Blue. Okay, so I just want to just look at Mexico quickly, and look at their latest information. So give me 1 second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Okay, and this is from the Mexico Ministry of Health. And I'm translating, okay? Spanish is not my first language. The first case was confirmed. First case of measles was confirmed in Epi Week 5. So what's that? Either the end of January, beginning of February. What they have right now, as of August 14th, is 4,079 confirmed cases of measles, with 21 cases in the last 24 hours. So this report is from August 14th. That's the most recent numbers. Now, the cases have been reported in 21 states and 87 municipalities, or cities. Yeah. And if we look at these numbers here, we can see that of the 4,079 total confirmed cases, 3,796 have been reported in Chihuahua state, which is near the border of Texas, New Mexico area. So the vast majority have been from Chihuahua. Sonora State has 87, and that's the closest to Chihuahua. Now 14 deaths have been reported in Mexico from measles. That's huge. We have 3 fatalities in the U.S., 1 in Canada, 14 in Mexico. And again, the vast majority of those were in Chihuahua. They had 13 fatalities. In addition to the confirmed cases, though, if you look at the far left of the chart, these are probable cases. That's another 3,283 probable cases. So, yeah, so that would be, if those were all confirmed, that would be well over 7,000 cases. Anyway, yeah, I just wanted to share that North America really got it bad. My understanding is, a lot of this came out of Mennonite communities, and in Texas, in Canada, and in Mexico, and in Chihuahua. Yeah, so these are communities that are not highly vaccinated for the most part. If I'm wrong, let me know, but I don't think they are. And that's that. That is that. Anything else? Is this worth doing? Are you finding it interesting? I like to go through. I like to get some more interaction. And like I said, if you want to come on the live stream, if you know something, something's going on in your area, I want to bring you on and talk about it. If you're from Kerala, India, and you're dealing with an outbreak of Nipah, but you're not a doctor or a scientist or anything, but you're just a person that lives there and dealing with the fear, or what you're doing to prevent it, or what the health department is doing. I'd love to have you on and talk about, hey, I'm from Kerala and Nipah is here and this is what's going on. I'd love to hear about that. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up now. Those that were here, thanks, and those that commented, thanks for watching. And I'll see you next time on Outbreak News TV.